Hey everyone, how is everyone doing? We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. If you can hear me, go ahead and on the chat you can write that you can hear me, and go ahead and also introduce yourself, telling me about where you are joining from. You can write it in the YouTube chat. That will be great. Post API covered? Yeah, we will cover part of the post API also. Yes, we will cover that. Yeah, okay. So go ahead, everyone. Introduce yourself. Where are you from? Where are you logging in from? Which country? Where are you? And we'll be starting in a few minutes. Kevin, based in London. Awesome. Actually, Kevin, I'll be visiting London when I'm going. In May 2000, this year, May, I'll be coming for the first time in my life, coming to London, and then going to the Swift Craft conference that will be in Folkestone, UK. So I'll be definitely going over there. I'm giving a workshop, so that will be good. Let me actually see what's going on over here. I got too many windows open, as usual. Let me go ahead and close some of these windows. Silicon Beach. Where is Silicon Beach? California? Palestine. You have Hyderabad, India, and Brazil, Athens, Greece, Kentucky. Awesome. That's pretty cool. Where did you hear about this? Where did you hear about this live stream? I always want to know so that I can, you know, so I can focus on that. So where did you hear about this live stream? On Twitter? Are you part of the Azam Sharp School? Santa Monica, California. Santa Monica is just such a beautiful place. It's just an amazing place. All right. Email, YouTube recommended. YouTube recommended, okay. That's interesting. Twitter, YouTube recommended, got from YouTube subscription alert, YouTube only. Okay, so basically it's YouTube and mail. Okay. All right, so a little bit introduction about me. My name is Mohammad Azam, and this is my website actually. It's azamsharp.school. There we go. All right. And I run azamsharp.school, where I host a lot of different videos, a lot of different courses. So if you go to azamsharp.school, scroll down, you'll find all the different courses. You can see everything basically related to iOS development. So this is like MVVM pattern, MV pattern, core data, full stack web development. This course is like full stack web development, Reality Kit, server-driven UI, test-driven development. So a lot of courses are over there. So you can definitely check that one out. And also on my website, I do host also workshops. So here's the link to the workshops. And I try my best so that everyone will have access to these workshops. So you can see the schedule over here for the workshops. Introduction to server-side Swift using Vapor. This workshop will be on March 23rd. And the pricing, I'm always making sure that everyone can afford the pricing. So this will be like 2.5 hour, or sometime close to 3 hour workshop. And it's only for $50. So you can definitely check out some other workshops that I'm offering. Swift Data Fundamentals, Introduction to Testing. So this will be live on Zoom and very hands-on. It will be all coding. You will be following along the code. I'll give you the repository. So it's a very practical workshops. I have been doing workshop for a long time, and I did it for Try Swift just yesterday, sold out 2 times. So definitely check out azamsharp.school and workshops. Okay. All right. So what are we trying to learn in this lecture or in this live stream? Let me first make sure that the font is big enough so you can read it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone can read the font. I think that's pretty big for me, but let me know in the comments if you can see the font correctly. This is nothing more than a SwiftUI basic application. I have not really changed anything. This is when you create a SwiftUI project, this is what you are going to come up with. So it's a very basic application. All right, and basically no code has been written. So in the comment, you can just give me thumbs up if you can see the font. Okay, looks good. Great. So as I mentioned that this workshop, this live stream, I keep saying workshop, but this live stream is about learning different kind of ways that are available that we can use to consume an API that is returning JSON. But what kind of an API are we talking about? All right, so let's take a look at the API. So API is something that I've already created. Now this font might be too small, but I'm trying to find, let's say, orders. Okay, so I'll just copy the link. Don't worry about the API itself. I mean, we're not really learning how to create the API, right? There we go. I'm not sure what was that. What's going on over here? Here we go. So the API is my own custom API that I have written, and it is returning you a couple of orders. These are coffee orders. So let's just say that people are placing coffee orders, and this is what it is returning. You can see it's a hard-coded thing. It returns you 2 items in an array, and each item will have an ID, name, coffee name, total, and the size. All right. But you can use any API that you want. I'm just using this API because I have complete control over it, because I created this API in Node.js. So we are using this particular API. Okay. Now, if I want to consume this API in my application, in my SwiftUI application, what do I have to do? And there are so many different ways to consume API, right? I mean, there are infinite number of ways that you can consume this. The first thing what I like to do is I like to create a model that is going to represent the response that I'm going to get from the server, right? I mean, pretty much, I think most of you are doing the same thing. You are trying to create a model that represents the response from the server. So let's take a look at the response that we're getting from the server. Okay, so we're getting these two kind of like a JSON objects. Each JSON object contain ID, name, coffee name, total, and size. Okay, so this is the stuff that we are getting back. And if we want to map this stuff into our own structure, into our own model, then we need to create the model. So let me go ahead and create the model. What should I call it? Well, I'll just call it order. I think that's a nice name. Model with URL components to be more robust and generic. Model with URL components to be more robust and generic. I don't know what that means. I think if you're talking about URL components, then you can definitely use URL components when you are making a request. That will make sure that your URLs are correctly formed. We are trying to do the very basic approach. So in this, we are not really going to be creating any generic layer. That's going to take a lot of time. So we're going to just create a very basic client that is only going to return you the orders. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our model, which is going to match exactly what the server is returning. So we're going to make this codable so that it can be decoded into. We will have a property called ID, and we will have some other properties that are being returned from the server. So there we go. Okay. Now these all properties have the same exact name and the data type that our server is returning, as you can see. All right. They can have different, they can have different property names, but then in that case you will have to, use coding keys. So I don't want to get involved with that right now. I think we can just create a really nice struct, which is order, and it has the ID, name, coffee name, everything is matching with whatever the server is returning. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are making a call to the server. And this is where if you are creating a generic network layer comes into play. But I'm just going to go ahead and create a non-generic layer. So I'll create a new group and I'll call it clients. You can call it anything you want. Clients means that this will be my actual layer, the networking layer. You can call it network clients if you want to. And now I can go ahead and create coffee client. The purpose of the coffee client is to actually make the request and get the response from the server. Okay, so that's the job of the coffee client. So let's go ahead and create that. Coffee client. Okay. Now, if you're building a large application, then you should have a coffee client which is more of a generic. Like it shouldn't have separate functions for, oh, this function is for getting all the orders and this function is to place the order. It should be generic, but we don't really have that much time to go into generics. So we are just going to try to implement this kind of like only from the aspect of that it's going to return orders. So I'll say load all orders. All right. We're going to pass in the URL and async throws. We're going to use async in await function and it's going to return us order. Nice and simple. Okay. So this is our HTTP client, you can say. This is our coffee client and it has a single function and it returns you orders. And this is what I'm talking about in your much bigger application where you're dealing with a lot of different models. You will return a generic type over here instead of order so that you can, and you will probably just have a single function to do all of those things. But we are limited with the time constraints. So I'm just going to create load all orders. Okay. And there are, I think I have code and videos that talks about how to create a generic layer. So if you search on YouTube how to create a generic layer in Swift Azam Sharp, so you'll get something over there. All right. So the first thing we're doing is getting the order. So URL session.share.data, and this is where we can select from the URL that is being passed to us. And this is going to return data and response. So we are using the async and await feature. Try await. And if you have any questions, go ahead and write your questions in the chat. Okay. But keep in mind that we're trying to do the very simple, very basic stuff so that we can quickly display all the orders from our API into our SwiftUI application. Next up, we can definitely check if the response is successful or not. So, HTTP response. We will try to cast this as HTTP URL response. If it's not, then throw error, which is invalid response. So over here, we can throw some sort of an error saying that this is an invalid response. Now, we don't really have any error to throw, but not a big deal because we can just quickly create a network error enum with some errors that are being thrown. So I can say over here, network error, invalid response. And we can throw this. All right. So if it goes past this particular line, then we can go ahead and start decoding. So we can use over here the JSON decoder .decode. And what are we decoding? We're decoding an array of orders. So that's why the order is in an array. And self means that this is the type that we are decoding. So an array of orders. And we can pass the data and that will decode it. Why can we use a class for the coffee client instead of a struct? That's a very good question. Why can we use a class over here instead of a struct? And you can definitely use a class instead of a struct. That's perfectly fine. My reasoning for using a struct is that it's not really holding any value that needs to be referenced somewhere else. So the coffee client in this case is simply stateless. It does not really have any state that will be reused or referenced by someone else. So it just makes a call, gets you the result, and you will see that in the end we are going to be injecting this either into the environment object or we will be injecting it in the environment itself as an environment value, which I believe requires structs. So it really depends what your use case is. In my case, my HTTP client is completely stateless. You just make the call, it returns you something, and that's it. All right. Okay, so over here we're going to get something. We're going to get the response ordered, I guess, orders. Okay, and else, again, we can throw an error over here saying network error dot decoding error. If there's a decoding problem, we can throw a decoding error, and in the end, we can go ahead and say orders. And as Tariq94 is saying, I believe because a struct is more lightweight and it's meant to do just one thing rather than referencing like a class does. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, no, that is correct. That's exactly what I was referring to, that it's not going to be referenced from somewhere else. That into the environment can have a class if you use observable. Okay, so we can have a class as Jan Stalik is saying, that you can have a class in the environment value. You can have a class. I guess I never tried that, but you can have a class if you are using observable. Okay, I'm talking about environment value, by the way. Okay. Okay. All right, so this function looks pretty good. Coffee client, load all orders. Once again, and I'm going to repeat it again, if you're working on a much larger application, which does have a lot of different models, like you have order and you have customer, you have inventory, whatever, then instead of creating separate functions for loading all orders, placing orders, get top order, get blah, 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 a generic coffee client will be a much better choice. This is not generic, meaning it does have a separate function for separate things. But due to time constraints, this is fine. All right, and due to our requirements. So now we have this coffee client over here, which is kind of like a HTTP client. And how do we use it, right? How do we use this coffee client? And I'll show you a couple of different ways that how you can use the coffee client. Let's go to my app over here, which is the content view. This is a kind of like a root view. I don't really like the name coffee content view. Our first screen will be the one that will be displaying a list of coffee orders. So let's replace this with something. Let's say rename this and let's call this coffee order list screen. Nice and descriptive. Okay, let's see if our preview works. Okay, the preview is working. That's fine. So now it's a little bit more descriptive. You can see coffee order list screen. Okay, instead of just content view. All right. So what do we do at this point? I mean, how do we call the coffee client? There are many different ways, so I'll show you a couple of different ones. What about if we just make a coffee client over here? Coffee client. How about this? If we make an object, if we initialize the object coffee client right inside our view over here, and just call it and get the data. And now if we want to, now I know, most of you will be like, hold on a second, don't we have to inject the coffee order list screen with the coffee client? What about if we have to mock? Absolutely. If you are using a out of process dependency or a, what is it called? The dependency that you don't control, then you will be mocking the coffee client because this is not something that you own. But I have complete access to the coffee client. I have complete access to the server. I mean, I wrote the server, so I have complete access to it. So that's why I don't really have to mock anything that I don't want to. It's not a unmanaged dependency. All right. So let me show you. So let's go over here, and we want to display the orders, right? So I'm going to say list. And well, the problem is that we don't have any place to put anything. So let me go ahead and create a local state called orders, which will be order, and we'll initialize it to be empty. All right. So you can see that I'm using a local state over here, which is basically orders, and it's an array of orders. And I'm going to go ahead and say orders. We're going to go through the orders, order in, and let's just start with just displaying the name of the person who placed the order. If we do that, we already have a problem because the error is saying that the order needs to be identifiable. Not a big deal. We can always go to the order and make it identifiable. There we go. So that will comply to the identifiable protocol because we are implementing the ID property. The ID property is the only requirement for identifiable or to become identifiable, and we're already doing that. Let's go back now. So hopefully this error will go away now. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh our preview. Now orders are not really going to get displayed because we haven't really made the call in our coffee client. So let's go ahead and make the call. I can say task. Okay. The task modifier is going to perform the asynchronous action inside this particular closure. So this closure that you see, this is already async, so you can await on things. So if I say await, I can say coffee client dot load all orders, providing the URL. Let's just go ahead and put a certain URL over here. I'll fix it in a minute, but just to see if it's working or not, right? I mean, we don't really want to do this over here. And let's go ahead and try something like this. All the horrible practice that you have learned, I'm doing all of that right now. All right? Okay. And the reason that I'm doing all of these horrible practices is I just wanted to see, can I make the call and get the stuff? All right? So this looks like it's working, but we need to clean this up. This is pretty bad, right? I mean, I'm using every bad thing that you can imagine. I'm using the try optional over here, force, and then I'm putting this over here also. So let's try to fix one thing at a time. Let's try to fix this URL. I don't really want to put the URL over here. The simplest approach that I can think of right now is, and there are many approaches, but the simplest one is, let me go ahead and create a utils folder. And inside the utils, I am going to add a different file. I'll call it constants. Now this is like, if you are going like super basic, then this is something that you can do. Okay. So let me go ahead and put the implementation of the constant file. The constant file is nothing more than a nested structures, and it's going to give you, basically it will have, some constant variables pointing to the URLs. It's nothing more than that. Let's go back now and replace this whole thing with something else. So this whole thing, actually, we can replace this whole thing with constants.urls.allOrders. Now this looks a little bit better. All right. Now the question is, if I wanted to save an authentication key, where is a good place to save it? If you want to save a authentication key, Jan, then you would be good place to save it, like a token, authentication token, bearer token, will be keychain. Keychain would be a good place to store it. Okay. Okay, so Tariq is asking, another question is, I'm using task modifier. Why am I using the task modifier? Can't I just use the task, which is, well, I don't think I can even do it over here. I guess if I'm using task, which is this one, I'll just type it out over here. It may not work. Okay, this one. So this one, when you use the task modifier, which obviously over here it's not going to work because it's at the wrong place, it's different from this task modifier. So this task modifier, the one that I'm highlighting, is not really going to go away if the view goes away. So these are not structured tasks. When you perform anything in this, there is a possibility, I mean, this will be async, but there is a possibility that the view just goes away, but the task is still running. So it's just, using resources of something that does not exist. So that's why I'm using this task modifier, which means if the list goes away, then this task will automatically be canceled. All right, and this is kind of like the same approach a little bit that React uses, and they call it use effect. So if you have used use effect, it's kind of like the same idea. All right, so we fixed this part. It's a little bit better instead of typing the whole URL over here. All right, we need to fix this also. So what I usually do in this case is I just create like a helper function. Private function. You don't have to, but I think helper function looks a little bit nicer. We'll call it async function. And we will just go ahead and move the code into a helper function. All right. And this function is only available inside the view. All right. And the view in SwiftUI is more of like a view model. Okay. So catch, and then we will say error. And over here, we can simply go ahead and call load orders. And if we run the app, it actually works, still works correctly. All right. You can see the display over here. You can see that everything is getting displayed. So this is kind of like a common approach that you can take when you are building, when you're trying to make a request and get the information on the screen. There are some points which I would like to go over is, since we don't have any unmanaged dependency, we just created our client right inside our coffee order list screen. We don't really have to pass in anything because we're not really mocking. We don't really have any protocol, nothing. If you were mocking, if you were trying to access an unmanaged dependency, then you will add the dependency over here. All right. Can I call the API on appear closure? How is it different from task? So if you want to call it on appear, you can, but it is usually a good idea to make sure that your tasks are, if your tasks are the job that you're trying to perform is asynchronous, then use the task modifier, because the task modifier is already asynchronous. If I type it again, you may be able to see that? It's kind of hard to see, but right there. So the action inside the task modifier is already asynchronous. So this means that you can easily call anything you want, which is async action. And that's exactly what we have done. We're calling load orders, which is an asynchronous action. Now, if you do it on appear, it will still work, but on appear, the context inside the on appear is not really asynchronous. It's just like wherever you are. So inside the on appear, you will have to switch the context, which comes back to task, and you will have to do all of that. All right. So if I do it, you may end up doing like this. Okay. So that's why you should probably use task modifier. All right. In Swift 6, this is wrong. Passing argument of non-sendable type outside of the main actor isolated context may introduce data races. So it's not, I don't think it's going to create any data races conditions. I mean, I'm not sure where it's going to cause the data races, but whenever you're performing an async and await function over here, or you're awaiting, it is going to take kind of like the parent context, which and await on that. So the call will be received on the main actor, and then the main actor will be refreshed. And you can try to run this app and analyze it or archive it, and you'll see that it's not really going to give you any errors. Sometimes people like to decorate it with a main actor attribute or a property wrapper, but in this case, it's not really required because it's just going to make a call, give you the information, and then setting the local state. But you can definitely check it out if in Swift 6 it's going to cause a problem or not. All right. So how can we improve it a little bit? I mean, this is perfectly fine. Another way to handle the same scenario is to use this coffee client in an environment value. All right, so let me see how we can create environment value. So I'll go ahead and create a different folder, and I'll call it environment values. And you'll see that environment value, if you put something in the environment value, and if you're working in a large organization, then they will be simply be interested in grabbing it from the environment value and then using it rather than creating the coffee client, in their code, or they can just use the environment value and get the actual value that they want. So I'll say coffee client environment key. I guess I can say environment value, maybe environment value over here, but I'm just going to say key or whatever. Better name pending. Okay. Let's go ahead and import. So just to reiterate, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it a little bit better, and we're trying to wonder if we can access like this environment coffee. I mean, in your case, it might be HTTP client. Coffee client is the same thing. I think it's going to look a little bit nicer if we can do that, right? And you can see that this is similar to when Apple allows you to access, dismiss, I guess. They allow you to access the dismiss. They allow you to access some other things. So it's a good idea we can put the coffee client into an environment value so that it is automatically be available to all the different views. And the way that we do that, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of like paste some code, is to create a custom environment value over here. All right, import SwiftUI. So we're creating a key called environment client, coffee client environment key. And the default, we're just setting it up to the coffee client. And then we are adding the environment values over here. Now, you can also extend your view to provide some helper function, but I think for our case, this is good enough. Okay. Now, how do we inject this? We can go back to our code, and I think we can just inject it over here, right? Environment key path, coffee client, it comes up now, and we can just inject the coffee client. And now we should be able to use coffee client. So hopefully it will work. I mean, it's the same thing, but now it's coming from the environment value rather than we're creating the instance. So this can be really beneficial for companies when they're writing their documentation, when they're writing their plan. They can have a lot of different environment values available for the developers. So if they want to get the HTTP client, well, just go ahead and get it from the environment value and you're done. Or if you want to get, I don't know, like some sort of a dismiss function, you can get like a validation messages, authentication controllers, all of those things you can put it in the environment values so it's easily accessible by all the views. And Apple does have some examples of this. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Authentication, no, it's not authentication controller, it's authorization controller SwiftUI. Let me see if I can find it quickly. There we go. You can see this. Where are we? Okay. So this is right from the Apple documentation. Let me put the link in the chat. Authorization controller. So I think this is for authorization request for something. And if you look at this, what they're doing is they are putting it in the environment and they're allowing developers like you to just grab it from the environment and then just use it. It's very similar to the model context you get for the Swift data or manage object context that you get for the core data. So depending on your needs, you can definitely do that. Okay. Okay, let's close this. So it looks like this is working. It displays all the stuff that we are, wanted to display. But what about post? Right? I mean, how do we perform a post, and from where do we perform a post? So a very common operation is to show a modal or a sheet, and from the sheet we can add something. So let me go ahead and create that by using the toolbar. So I can use toolbar content. We'll say trailing, and we'll say I mean, your UI, you can build your UI any way you want. I'm just trying to keep it simple. I'll say add order. So you will see on the top right hand corner. Oh, I should probably wrap this in a navigation stack also in the preview, or else it's not going to work. Okay, so right now you can see over there we have the add order. And when we click on add order, we want to go to a different screen. We want to show a different screen. So I'm going to go ahead and create a is presented Boolean. Okay, and when you do that, I'm going to say is presented equals to true, and then we will have a sheet which is going to be binded to is presented and going to say add new order. Obviously, this view text add new order should be something else. So now if I say add new order, at least I can see the view popping up. But that's not the add new order view. So we should probably create add new order view. I'm going to go ahead and add a new SwiftUI view, add new order screen. Okay, that's our screen. Now, when you're adding the order, you need to supply a lot of different things. You need to supply the name of the person, the coffee name, total size, or total, like the dollar amount, and the size. All right, so you will have to create a form. That's going to take a little bit of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a button. When you press a button, it will make a request and place an order. Okay, but the form and something that you can create on your own. All right, I guess we can create a form. The only thing is that I'm not going to take the time to validate the form. All right, so let me see if I can create the form quickly. So what do we need? We need private var name of the person who is making the order. We need a coffee name, I guess. Coffee name. We also need total and size. Total will be double, I believe. All right. I'm not sure if I can assign a 0 or something, but we'll say 0. And size, which will also be string. The problem is that creating the form based on these values, it usually takes a lot of time because some of them will require segmented control, and I don't really have time to create segmented control right now. So I'll say name, and I'll talk about the code that I'm writing. I'm just going to go ahead and do quickly coffee name so that we can have something to put the order in. For the total over here, for the total, I think there is a call, and I keep on forgetting. I think it's called a value or something. Value. The value will be total, I guess, and format will be number. And I'm not sure what label means, but let's see if it compiles. Localized key string. Enter total. Okay, let's see if it builds successfully or not. Okay, so this is something that you'll have to figure out, like, okay, I don't want to display a 0, I want to display something else. And not that. The final thing is the size. So size is again string, and this will be, in reality, it will be a segmented control, but right now we're just saying size. And I think size have to be small, medium, or large. So segmented control is a much better choice rather than what I'm doing. And then we have place order. The button, okay. We can wrap this in a, for our preview, we can wrap this in a navigation stack so that we can add some sort of a title, like adding an order. Okay, now it looks pretty decent. So now the question is, okay, how do we place an order, right? How do we make sure that the order goes through when we click the button? For this, we have to go back to our client, because the client, the HTTP thing, actually I should probably fix this also. We are only looking for responses where the response status is 200, okay? Or else we don't really care that much. So currently we don't really have any function to place an order. So let's go ahead and create that function. Place order. Once again, I'm gonna just use a stepper, for, not sure where are we gonna use a stepper in this. URL, order will be coffee order. No, not coffee order, it's just an order. All right. Async throws, it's not the quantity of the order. I think it's more like the segment, like medium and all that stuff. So we have a place order function. It's going to take a URL. It's going to take the order that you're trying to place, and then it's going to place the order. How do we place the order? Well, status code should be 200. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 200. There we go. So how do we place the order? Well, we place the order by first creating a request, which is a URL request. We're going to pass in the URL. We're going to set a couple of different things on the URL, like the headers. Very important that you set the headers, like application JSON, because our server is expecting JSON. So make sure that you set the content type. Okay. We are also going to say HTTP body. Like, what exactly are you trying to send? So I'm going to say JSON encoder dot encode the order. That's what we're trying to send. And we will also say request dot HTTP method. Is it a post or a get? By default, it will be a get. So make sure you change it to post. And now we can do the same exact thing that we were doing last time. Like, we are going to go ahead and make a request, all of that stuff. We're going to get the response. Now, when you place a new order, and if the order is successful, the response that you are going to get will be the new order. So keep that in mind, because that's how I have coded my server. So we get the new order, and now we can go ahead and return the new order. All right, order. We can say over here, new order. This is just one quick way of implementing our server, but obviously there are more ways of implementing it. So this is our place order in our HTTP client or our coffee client. If you pass in the correct URL, if you pass in the order, it's going to place an order. And on the server, it's going to add the coffee order. Okay, so how do we use it now? Okay, so let's go back to the add coffee order screen. And there are different ways of using it. Okay, so on the add coffee order screen, if we want to place an order, I would like to create a function over here, like a small helper function that is responsible for placing the order. So place order. This will be an async function. What am I doing wrong? There we go. Okay. We need to get access to the HTTP client, meaning the coffee client. So hopefully we can just drag it from the over here. If you need a key to the authorize, you would add another value in the header. Yes. So the question is, if I need to send something like another key, right? So we will just add the key over here. Once again, I'm going to reiterate a third time that if you are building a much larger application, because this is just for a demo, you would probably, it will be a good idea to invest in a generic coffee client which can work with all the models. Because right now we are working with only the order. We have one function for loading the order and one function for placing the order. What about if we were dealing with, I don't know, getting categories? One function for getting categories, one function for adding categories. It can be a lot of functions. So that will be a good time to start thinking about creating a generic HTTP layer, HTTP client, where you only have one or two functions and all the headers are already set up by default. Let's go back over here. Let's try to, I need to get access to the coffee client. So I guess I have to inject it over here. environment key, for the previews at least, coffee client, it will be coffee client. And the reason I'm doing that is that so I can access it from the environment value. So environment value, coffee client, and we will say coffee client. So now I have coffee client. I can use that to place an order. So first, let's go ahead and create the order. I would say, yeah, let's go ahead and create the order. Name, coffee name, total, size. And this function place order will be fired after you have hopefully validated the input. All right. Now, if I call place order from here, it's going to complain that the place order is an async function and you can't really call it like this. So you have multiple choices over here. You can create this async context, and by creating this context, now you have an asynchronous context and now you can await on it, or you can use the task modifier. So you have multiple options over here. I think when you use this approach, then if there is a long-running task for place order and you just go away after making the order, then your order will never be canceled. Now, maybe that is something you want. You don't really want your order to be canceled if something happens. But if you want the reference to go away when your view goes away, then another technique that sometimes I use is I use a task modifier. So let me show you how we can do that. It's a little bit more work. I will create a state variable over here, which will be ordering false. And whenever you click this button, what we do is we simply set the ordering to be true. Okay, and then what? Well, then we can go ahead and use the task modifier. And task modifier contains one of the functions, one of the overload is where you can pass an ID. So we can say ordering over here and perform an action over here. So what is going on over here? Why is a task modifier taking an ID? What does that even mean? So task modifier takes an ID and we're passing in ordering. This means that whenever the ordering actually changes, then you will run this task modifier. So when the page is loaded, the task modifier is actually run. But whenever the ordering value changes from true to false or false to true, then also the task modifier is going to run. So we can say that if you are ordering, then we will go ahead and place the order. And after placing the order, we can go ahead and set it to be false. So this is another way of kind of like doing the same thing. It does look like a little bit more work, but the safety that you get from here is that if the view goes away, if something happens to add new order screen and it's taking a very long time to place an order, then the order will be canceled. Now, maybe you want that, maybe you don't want that. That's kind of like up to you. All right. Jan is saying that when using task, again, getting the same warning for specific passing argument of non-sendable type, new ordered screen outside of the main actor. I think when you're using the task modifier, then you do maybe have to specify that where you want to call that. Since we are using the not the task modifier, but this one, if you use this, then maybe we do have to specify that the thing that you're trying to run has to be run on the main actor. But since we're using the task modifier on line number 38, we don't really have to, maybe we don't have to specify because this will be using the UI, the queue or the UI thread to make that call on the main actor automatically. So maybe that's the one. All right. I don't know about Swift 6 because I don't think I have Swift 6 right now. All right. Yeah, you may have to try like a main actor macro. So maybe wrap it with main actor closure and call it over there. Or maybe you have to do like this, maybe main actor, something like that. Okay, so we created the order. What's the next thing? Well, we need to place the order. So I can say coffee client dot place order with the URL. Actually, the URL was never passed to us. Where do we get the URL over here? Let's see. Coffee. Oh, I think I can just use the constants dot URL dot new order, passing in the order. Okay. Now all of this is a try catch thing, so we have to make sure that we are wrapping it. There we go. And we will get some sort of an error. Try await probably. And we will get a new order. I think that's what it is returning. Okay. Now here's a question for everyone, a very important question. At this point, we have placed an order, hopefully. We are in add new order screen. The order is placed. The modal should go away. Okay, that's not a big deal because we can always use the dismiss environment value. So let me go ahead and do that. If it is placed correctly, we can just dismiss. But how can we tell the other one, all right? How can we tell the other one, which is the coffee list screen, to refresh itself? I think that's an important question, like how can we do that? All right. Trial code with concurrency checking on. I'll check it out later, yeah. I think if there is a problem with Swift 6, then maybe we have to decorate it with other stuff. Thanks. Let's go ahead and try it out. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the name. Let's say if Jerry is ordering a coffee, coffee is called hot coffee. The amount is, actually, let me go ahead and run the app so we can get the whole flow, and making sure that we are showing the add new order screen. Let me go ahead and run this. All right. So we can see the orders up. We don't really see the toolbar. I think we have to use a navigation stack. So let's go and wrap everything in a navigation stack. And I think we also have to do a little bit more stuff with this. I wonder if I can inject environment over here. Environment key path. This will be coffee client. All of the stuff that we did, that was for basically for the previews, but we have to add this also to make it work for the actual app. Okay, so we get these two orders. I'm going to go to add order. It shows me the screen. That's good. Let me go ahead and write a name of the person. I'm going to say hot coffee. Let's say $5, size small. Place the order, but the parent doesn't refresh, right? I mean, we have placed the order, hopefully. I mean, I can run the app again and we will see that the order is placed or not. Okay, order is placed, but as you have seen that our view, our parent, the coffee list view screen doesn't know that it has been updated. So what do you think? There are many different approaches for this problem, but what do you think we can do? I mean, once we get the new order, how can we give this new order to the coffee order list screen? Any ideas, any clues? And I've tried different approaches. One approach, which is I think the most common one, is you can just add a closure and then you pass it down as a closure, right? So that can be one approach if you want to use that. So I'll show you that approach, but it will be up to you to decide that if that approach works for you or not. So the problem we're facing is the add new coffee order screen is a modal. It performs the order, it gets the new order, but it needs to give this new order to the coffee list screen so that the coffee list screen can update itself. So I'm going to use a closure over here. Let's go ahead and create the closure. We'll call it onSave. We are passing the order and nothing over here, just void. Once we place an order, we can pass onSave. and pass in the new order. So we'll call this particular closure once we get the new order. And a couple of different things are breaking right now because now our add new order screen, the preview is saying that, hey, you got to pass in something over here. What is it called? On save. I'm not really interested in that, so I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay. And the calling side will also change because now the coffee order list screen, this part needs to be updated because now we are passing a closure on save. I'm going to get the order. Once we get the order, we can say orders.append the order. So that's one of the ways that you can do that, where you can, from the modal, you can pass the order as in the closure, and then the orders, which is a private state for the coffee order list screen, gets updated. Now, if I run the app, you may be able to see that when I add a new order, let's say I add a new order over here, George hot coffee, $10, large, George. See that? So that's one way to do that you use the closure to pass the value to the parent, to the person who actually, created this. Okay. There are some other ways also. Sometime I've seen people, what they do is they do add new ordered screen and they actually pass in the orders as a binding. That just looks weird. I mean, it will work, but that just looks kind of weird because now the add new ordered screen, you need to pass in orders. That's kind of look weird. Okay. This is kind of like a common one that people use. But there is another approach that sometime for large projects, what I do is I end up creating something called, which I like to call store. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and create a store, and you'll see that it kind of looks like a view model, but the concept is a little bit different. So I'm going to add a new store. You could pass order down child view as a reference and update it right. Yeah, you could also pass order array down child view as a reference. Yeah, so I think this is the approach maybe you're talking about, Jan, is add new ordered screen. You can probably do orders. If you simply pass in orders over here, then it may not work correctly because you need to pass in as a state variable, as a binding. So this will work. If you do that, that will perfectly fine and that will work, but I think it just looks kind of weird that now the add new order screen has access to the orders. I mean, it just looks kind of weird when you're calling this, okay? So another way is if I add something called a store, coffee store, okay? Now this coffee store will look kind of like a view model. And you can think of it as a view model, but it's not a view model that I'm creating because I added a new screen. So this will be responsible for managing the entire entire state for the entire app. So I can go ahead and do this. Observable. I think I may have to import observation framework. Okay. So coffee store is a class because on the class you can put observable, and this is responsible for managing the entire state of the app, at least for our app because our app is small. If you have a much larger app, then you will have one coffee store, one will have account store, inventory store, catalog store, something else store, all right? And you are going to be passing in the client, which is the coffee client. So the HTTP layer will be passed as a dependency. Let's go ahead and create that. And it will have an array of orders because it manages the entire state of the application, at least for our app, because our app is so small, we don't really need to create multiple stores over here, okay? And what will it do? Well, it will have all the functions to get the orders, the loading the orders. It will have the function for placing the orders, placing the order. Okay, let's go ahead and say change that. So it will kind of like look like this. Everything related to our coffee orders, we will have coffee order as an observable class, and you will inject the client, meaning the HTTP client, into it, and then you will call these. Okay. Now for a small app, you only may need one particular store. So all the business logic you can put in the store. Maybe you want to create another function over here which will give you the top selling coffee, right? So you can do all of those things over here. Okay, so how do we use this coffee store? Let's go back to our app. Just like we are using environment object, I guess we don't really need environment object anymore because we can go ahead and inject this as a coffee store with a coffee client. So what did I miss over here? Oh, I have to make an object, obviously. There we go. Okay, so we're injecting this as a environment object into the coffee order list screen. And how do we access it? Well, we access it through the use of environment. So environment, and we will say coffee store.self private var coffee store, and every interaction that your view will have will be through the use of coffee store. Okay, so let's see. If we want to load our coffee orders, we were doing load coffee orders over here, right? We can probably try to do await coffee store dot load orders and pass in constants dot urls dot all orders. I think this can actually blow up. So again, you can separate it out into a function, or you can just write it over here. That's fine. There we go. Error. And coffee store load orders is not really going to give you anything. It is maintaining its own state. So you can simply ask the coffee store to give you all the orders. There we go. All right. So if I refresh it on the right hand side on the client, on this, hopefully we can see all the orders right there. So this is definitely working. How will that change our add new order screen? Well, add new order screen can also do the same thing. It will have access to the environment object, which will be coffee store, which will take in a coffee client as a dependency. And we will try to get access to the environment. So now add new coffee order screen and coffee list screen, both of them are using the coffee store, which is managing the entire state of the application. And just to reiterate, the coffee store is not added because I added a view. There is no view model for coffee order list screen and a separate view model for add new coffee order screen. There's just coffee store, and both of them, the coffee order list screen, add new coffee screen, both of them can use that. Okay, how do we make the order? Well, we will say coffee store dot place order with a URL, which will be constants dot urls dot new order, passing in the order. This is going to return us some sort of a order, and the beauty of this is, since it returns the new order, we can just put it inside the orders. And the parent should automatically be updated in this case. So we don't really need any of this stuff. What did I miss over here? Cannot expect this for this. Does it not return anything? It does return try await. That is fine. Let me see. Maybe I'm missing something. Coffee store dot orders dot append. Maybe I use a different one. New order Why is new order weird over here? Shouldn't the new order be, maybe I'm missing something over here. I thought that the new order will be try await something something. Not sure what's going on. I think I'm missing something. Isn't the new order supposed to be order over here? Why is it a function? Am I returning something weird? Maybe I'm doing something weird over here. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Placing an order is already doing all of that stuff. So I don't really have to do any of this stuff. There we go. You can see the placing the order. It places the order, it gets the new order, and then it adds it into the orders array automatically. So I don't really have to do it anything. It's already baked in to my coffee store. So that is managing the entire state of my application now. All right. So depending on what you're trying to do, you can use one of these approaches. I usually end up going with the approach where I am creating the coffee store, and that is managing most of the stuff in my application. And coffee store for our very small app may look something like this. But when you have a larger app, then you will have to decide when to break it up into inventory store, catalog store, account store, this store, that store. And I think that is, that is more kind of like a maintainable solution, because you can easily write unit tests for it if you want to. All right. And I have covered this very much in my article also. It's a pretty long article, but you can definitely check it out. Building large-scale apps. So I'll just put a reference over here. Okay. And in this, I talk about that how you can design your app for larger scale. You can see that we do cover the same thing. This is coming from Apple's documentation, and for larger apps you may end up with, you'll have to read the article, it's pretty long. So for larger apps you may end up with like different stores or aggregate models. Sometimes I call them aggregate models, which are divided based on the bounded context, all right, of the application. So how does it differ from a view model approach? Well, a couple of things. In this case, it differs. The first thing it differs is that I am not, basically it's the idea. That means that I am not creating view model. I think if you were creating view model, then you would have this. Let me see. You would have a view model called coffee order list view model. That is the first thing you will have. And then you will have another one, which is what? Add new order. Add new order view model. The problem with this approach is that now your view models are now dependent on the number of screens that you're adding. And if they want to communicate with each other, it becomes very hard. I mean, you have to use the approach, you have to pass in an array as a binding, or you have to use closures, and those things starting to break apart when you are passing this from a very child context. Like if you have some sort of this structure, and this guy right there, child, updates something, then you're going to use a closure to pass it up. You're going to use a closure to pass it up. And closure into closure, that becomes a really messy situation. All right. You could have a content view model and pop everything in there, subviews can access it. Yeah, so that's exactly what kind of like the approach that we are taking. We are calling it store, but you have everything in there, and then this is injected into environment so all the views can access it. But I think the whole idea of creating view model per screen, that is a dangerous territory. And it will become really clear if you are doing any kind of a core data development or Swift data. If you try to shove in view models in there, it's not going to work, and you will be working against the framework rather than working with it. A lot of people have left the view model approach, especially for the core data and Swift data applications, because they just don't want to bang their head against the wall for every single thing that they're doing. So although this approach is similar to the view model, but I think the part where we're when we are adding these stores is very different. Yeah. So, but it is similar. I would say, I would definitely agree with that. It is very similar to that. All right. Now, if you do have any logic, like let's say that I don't really have any logic over here, right? If you have any logic that you want to perform, you have multiple options over here. Um, if I want to do sorting, I can put my sorting code for the coffee orders right in the coffee store so that everyone can access it. If I have something logic related to the presentation of the UI, I can't really think of anything, but if you do have some sort of presentation thing that you want to think of, then you can just add a presentation logic over here. All right, that is perfectly fine. How do you test the presentation logic? That's another question that comes up. The way that I test the presentation logic or any logic that you type in your view is when I do end-to-end testing, I make sure that that logic is also tested out. Like if you have to select a segmented control and do something like that, those things are selected using the end-to-end test. But end-to-end tests are not really testing one presentation logic like, oh, is the disable button yes or no? I'm not going to test that. I'm going to test that, can I fill out a form, a login form, and then make a request and the account is created successfully. So your tests have to be much more, much more core, much more at a higher level than unit test. I mean, obviously you should write unit tests for the logic in coffee store and other parts, but for the presentation logic, sometimes you can just extract it out into a struct and write a test for it. And those are all the things that I actually talk about over here somewhere. If I go to this article testing, yeah, so over here, I think I talk a little bit about that. Not sure where it is. End-to-end testing, integration testing. So I do cover a little bit about testing over here. Okay. But hopefully this particular live stream has given you some idea about what are different ways of performing, performing a request. Sometime you can just ignore the coffee store and just stick with the coffee client. In cases where you're just getting the data from the server, you're not really manipulating it, and you're just trying to display it, which is usually for third-party APIs, right? I mean, if you're using a weather API, if you're using a news API, you're not really manipulating the weather, or, we're not really doing anything. In those cases, you can use this approach of just directly accessing the HTTP client within your view, and that will be perfect. That will be perfectly fine, all right? Because you're just putting JSON on the view, and that's pretty much it, all right? But that is pretty much it. I hope that you have liked this lecture or this live stream. Once again, if you want to learn more about the videos, the courses that I do, definitely check out azamsharp.school. This is where you can find all of my courses. I am currently researching and working on a course on SwiftUI architecture. It is going to take a little bit of time to develop that, but that course is currently underway in the planning phases, and it will be released soon. I'm not sure when, but it will be released. You can definitely check out. I mean, you can check out all the reviews and everything. Definitely check out the workshops also. The workshop will be very hands-on, and I think you're going to enjoy the workshops, and they cost just so little that anyone can enroll. Okay. So once again, thank you so much everyone for attending, and hopefully we can do this again next time. All right. Thanks a lot everyone for attending. And if you do have any question, you can write it on the comments. I'll be here maybe a couple of more minutes. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming.